a lot of the conversation that we've had already is happening in part because jobs change due to technology, due to innovation. Tale as old as time. So we could spend this time kind of going into the dystopian future and talking about our robot overlords, but I think what I'd prefer to do is start off on a note where we talk about some of the opportunities that technological changes and disruption present. So I want you guys to talk a little bit about where you see the opportunity for job growth and changes. Mark, I'm going to start with you since you're next to me.
Okay, great. Well, so when I think about the opportunities, I think about a couple of trends that have happened in the last 15, 17 years. First off, if you look at corporate IT, we spent a lot of our time chasing cost reduction, and we've sent a lot of jobs to cheaper locales around the world where labor is cheaper. If you look at just one statistic, if you look at the year 2000, there were 73 US IT workers for every one in India, and if you look at today, there's 0.4 US IT workers for every one in India. In that same time frame, though, if you look at the companies that make products, tech products like Apple and Google as sort of the poster children for it, they invested a lot in building a great user experience and have done tremendously well, right? So it's led to a lot of success. And I think these two trends together create a real opportunity for taking a product mindset to applying technology to just about every industry that is here. And I think that it also actually creates an opportunity for local jobs in the US. So even though we've shipped a lot of them offshore to save cost, you need people in the same time zone, in the same business climate, in the same sort of consumer context to understand how to build a great experience. And I think that creates a great opportunity.
Yeah. Beth, Karan, where are you guys seeing opportunities?
So I'd say I think where we see opportunity is technology and technology jobs being a driver for inclusive growth. And I say that for two reasons. One is there are lots of these jobs that are open today. And so there are over 500,000 jobs in the US today that are open. And they're becoming harder and harder to fill. These jobs are on average $50,000 to $60,000 a year. They're firmly middle-class jobs, and they are everywhere in the country. So more than 2/3 of those jobs are not in the tech sector. These are not in Silicon Valley. They're not in the Bay Area. They're everywhere. They are in pharmaceutical companies, and healthcare companies, and insurance companies, financial services companies, all across the country. Providence, Rhode Island, Detroit, everywhere. So these really are today, and we can talk about the future later, but today, middle-class jobs that are open and present opportunities for many folks who need that today.
And I'll build on that because I agree with what both folks have said. But when we think about how technology is changing jobs, it's not just changing jobs in technology companies or in the IT function in your company. It is actually changing everybody's job. There's not a person in this room, I'm sure, who has not used technology already today to do part of their job, because I'm pretty sure everybody's checked their email at least once. So it is embedded in every job. It's in advanced manufacturing. It's in healthcare. And it creates opportunities. It also, I think, creates an opportunity to think differently about how we hire people, how we train people, how we enable people to have good jobs and good careers. So think about your ability to demonstrate your skill. At Skillful, we are focused on skills-based hiring, getting companies and individuals to really say, what can I do today? What can I learn to do? You know, you could think today how you can do that in parts of software, right? People give you a test to see whether you can go find bugs. But if you think about technology and how it could enable that, you could do a virtual reality simulation of somebody in a computer service, customer service job, and enable them to show what they can do versus relying on pedigrees. And I think this linkage to some of the earlier conversations around credentials become important, because when we focus on what people can do and can learn, I think we open up a lot of opportunities, particularly for people who don't have the traditional, the 70% of the American workforce that does not have a bachelor's degree.
Right. So, Karan, I want you to follow up on this. You just said 500,000 jobs don't have workers. The labor force participation is low. Obviously, we're missing something here. We're either missing something on the hiring front, or we're missing something on the skills and training front, or we're missing both. Can you talk a little bit about how we bridge that gap and what, in fact, is missing here?
Yeah, so this is the focus of opportunity at work. And I would say there are a few things. The first thing I'd start is building off of what Beth was saying, is that we have to rethink the way hiring is done. And it has to be based on demonstrations of skill and not pedigree. And I'll give you very specific examples of that. So today, if you pick up most middle-class job descriptions and you read them, they will say 4-year degree required. They will say X number of years of work experience required, typically in the exact same thing that you are hiring a quote-unquote entry-level worker for. And so that signal filters out millions of people. So there are 30+ million people in the country today who started college and didn't finish, right? And what that job description is saying to them is that you haven't learned anything. Like, that is what the signal is in the market today. So if that person applies, they could have learned it. They could have learned it through a mentor. They could have learned it on the job somewhere else. They could have learned it online. They could have learned it in a workforce training program. They could have learned it through their life experience in many different ways. But this is baked into the business process. So as soon as they apply, in the applicant tracking systems, in the resume keyword filters, like, that business process is screening them out automatically. No one is intentionally saying you are not qualified for this job. It is unintentional, and it's based into the process and the incentive system that exists today. And until we change that side of the equation, we can do a lot of work on training and getting skills, but we won't know why they're not getting a job. Right?
Beth, you seem eager to jump in there.
I agree. I'll give you another example. There's a company in Colorado called Aquahot. We're working in Colorado. And they make things you attach to your RV. And they couldn't hire anybody. They had the dilemma. They were advertising for mechanical engineers. We worked with them in Skillful to say, okay, what really are the skills you need in this job? And it turns out you did not need a degree in mechanical engineering. You needed very specific knowledge and skills. Their old postings for mechanical engineers got them actually 0 applicants. And when they went through this skills process and changed what they wanted, it turns out if you were a diesel mechanic, you actually had what they need. They now had applicants. They now can grow the company. They are creating great jobs for people who, and frankly, with more upside than those folks had had in their previous work. So that's a place where you say, what are the skills that I need at a granular level? And that opens up the pool, and for this company, it opened up growth opportunities.
Right. Mark, how are you thinking about the hiring process, given everything that we've just heard about some of the changes that need to take place more broadly?
Yeah, at Nexient, we do a lot of skills-based hiring as well. So it's nice for us in that we're hiring a lot of developers, and we can very concisely give them tests to understand how good they are at writing code and how good they are at developing. But we can also, and we were talking about this earlier, we can also sort of take that same idea and apply it to other areas. So if we're hiring somebody into a position who's going to be doing communications primarily, or maybe they're an analyst who's going to be capturing requirements, we try to give them a test where we ask them to take some set of requirements and boil it down to a quick summary. And you get very different results when you ask somebody to create that deliverable. And so it's a much better way than just talking about what they've done and really seeing what their work product looks like. And you tend to get the people who produce great work products.
Yeah. When we talk about technology and disruption, and this is a complaint that I hear a lot, people tend to focus on coastal cities. They talk about Silicon Valley, they talk about San Francisco, they talk a little bit about New York, they talk about DC. Beth, you're in Colorado. Mark, you're in Ann Arbor quite a bit. How do we think about bringing workers with these skills and jobs that need these skills to the rest of the country where the workers are and where they need work?
Well, at Nexient, that's what we're all about. So we have a delivery center-based model with delivery centers in Michigan and Indiana. And so what we're doing is we're building this community of technologists in the Midwest. And they love it. There's a lot of people in the Midwest that want to go to one of the coasts, but I think there are even more people that go to school somewhere in the Midwest and want to stay in the Midwest in general. So we can recruit them, we can bring them into Ann Arbor, and they love the lifestyle. They love the community we've built. So there's this community of world-class technologists who work on problems for all sorts of both Fortune 500 companies and software companies building product. So they love the work, they love the lifestyle, and they get to stay in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And I think in Colorado, we started this effort in Colorado because there was a real commitment from a whole set of actors across the state, starting with Governor Hickenlooper and his entire administration, from the business community, the community college system, a network of nonprofits. We had LinkedIn and now Microsoft as a partner, and it was about partnerships. How do we create opportunities for Coloradans in particular? There's lots of people moving to Denver. Those actually tend to be folks who have a college degree, and they wanted to make sure that we were creating opportunities and pathways in this growing economy for the folks who are in Colorado who might not have that degree, but have the skills, have the aspirations, have the capabilities. And so I think this ability, and we heard some of this earlier when we were talking about what's going on here in Atlanta, when you create that integrated view and get people pulling in the same direction, you can drive that kind of change and create the opportunities that allow individuals to thrive and businesses to grow.
I'll build on that and say one of the initiatives of Opportunity at Work is the Tech Hire network that exists in 70+ places across the country, and where you see really vibrant local ecosystems are not always in those places. They are in Providence, Rhode Island, in Akron, Ohio, in Eastern Kentucky, in Nashville, where, to your point, what is happening is the hiring piece is critical, but it's not enough. Right? You need the ecosystem that is then bringing together training providers, education providers. Right? Today, this morning, Georgia Tech and then the technical college system talking about what those partnerships look like. What is the role of community-based organizations, of outreach organizations? Because even if the hiring was based on demonstrations of skill, which we believe is critical, people need a pathway to be able to then get the skill so that they can then show it. And that's going to require, for it to be truly inclusive, all of that sort of local actors coming together and working hand in hand with the right signals of what are the skills, how do you demonstrate them, and then therefore how do you train for them.
Right. And when we talk about pipeline, Beth, I know in Colorado they recently, I believe, passed a law related to apprenticeships and letting high schoolers know what their options are as far as careers. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it plays in?
Sure. The program, Colorado has put in place an apprenticeship program. It's called CareerWise, and importantly, it is part of this integrated view that's been driven through the governor and the business community, in fact, a group called the Business and Experimental Learning Commission, the Bell Commission. The idea is to say, as people are going through school, we want them to be thinking about what are the range of options that are available that will allow them to have a sustaining job, a satisfying job that could involve college completion, but not necessarily. And so part of the law, besides creating opportunities for apprenticeships in high school, co-enrollment in the community college system, and a whole range of things, is ensuring that the individuals in the high school system who are talking to kids about their future talk about the range of options, so it is not college or bust, because then you don't create a set of people who say, well, if I don't do that, or if I start and I don't finish, I therefore have lost, right? That there are multiple pathways to succeed, and we actually, Skillful, working with CareerWise and a bunch of others, has actually explicitly laid out sort of, here's a set of pathways and the kind of skills you need to build, whether that's in an IT job or a healthcare job or a business services job. So it is very much trying to change the frame to say, how can we get someone to imagine a future that they can get excited about and then understand the variety of ways that they can get there?
So when we think about tech jobs, I think a lot of times people think of the tech industry as its own siloed thing. And the thing that I've been hearing a lot since I got here and since we started having these conversations is that that is not a useful way to think about things. There are, of course, the tech industry, but as you said, there are all the ways that tech is integrated into all of our jobs, changing all of our lives constantly. So with that in mind, what are the skills that workers should be prioritizing when it comes to getting trained in the first place or getting retrained? Karan, I'm going to start with you.
So we have been developing a set of what we call validation solutions to do tech hiring, which is demonstrations of skill that then companies say, okay, if you can demonstrate that, we will look at this pool of talent that we are screening out already, and for individuals to do that and get feedback. And I would say, so there are a set of hard skills that are dependent on the role, that you would need, whether it's a web developer or whether it is a network engineer. But then what we hear a lot is then there's a set of behavioral skills, and the ones that keep coming up often are problem solving, teamwork, communication, and then this notion of this, are you learning to learn, right? Are you going to be able to learn on the job as the pace of change, accelerates, right, in terms of what's happening? And the interesting thing about what we're seeing is that, yes, people need ways to learn about those skills, and then when they are demonstrating them, the other thing that individuals need is feedback. They need feedback on, this is where the gap is, and this is the part that I need to close or do better on, because that is how learning and growth happens. So in one of the validations, I will give a very specific example, to assess these soft skills, what we do is we have a volunteer network of HR professionals that do a 30-minute mock interview with the individuals, and the last 5 to 10 minutes of that is feedback back to the individuals. So yes, they're assessing problem solving, communication, teamwork skills, but they're also giving that individual feedback on what they need to do better. And one of the first ones we did, we had an individual who was a server in a restaurant, wanted a job in web development and had learned the skill, and the question was, give me an example of a time where you've worked in a team. And the answer of this individual was, well, I can't remember a time that I worked in a team. And the feedback was, well, tell me, what do you do as a server? You have to work with the kitchen staff, you have to expedite things, you have to manage shift change, you have to manage expectations with your supervisor and your shift manager. That is working in a team. You need to be able to express that, right, in these ways. So yes, I mean, those are the skills that come up. You need to be able to teach that, but you need feedback, and you need that constant cycle loop that doesn't happen today very often, definitely not in the hiring process.
Mark, I want you to weigh in on that as well.
Yeah,
What are the
so I would agree, and we've got a couple of sort of terms we use at Nexient to talk about it. So one is, we talk about this idea of learning how to learn, and we talk about our employees as technology athletes, the idea being that athletes are always constantly working out to try to make themselves better. We want technology people who are doing the same thing, because the one thing that's constant is that it's always changing. Whatever technology you need to know something new a year from now. So we talk about technology athletes. We also talk about what we call T-shaped employees. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that the T, sort of the long part of the T, is some area you've got a lot of depth in. It may be a particular area of programming or business analysis or something. And then the top of the T is this ability to work with the team, right? And so it's all the collaboration skills required. At the end of the day, I think the most innovation comes from cross-functional teams. When you get people with very different perspectives, you get the business owner who really knows what the customer wants, the technology architect who really knows what's possible, and until those two sort of work together, that's when you really get the innovation to happen. That something new that really meets an unmet need of the end user is possible because of some architecture component, and that's what we're trying to get with those T-shaped technology athletes.
So I have one or two more questions for our panel, but we want to, as always, make sure you guys have your voices heard too. If you have questions, start thinking about them, condensing them, make sure they're questions and not comments, etc. So when we talk about the tech pipeline, we would be remiss to not discuss how we make sure that it is equitable and inclusive. A lot of the criticism that we hear about tech jobs and the people who are moving up in tech jobs is that it is predominantly a white, male, affluent pipeline. So I'm wondering, as we think about changing jobs and as we think about training and retraining workers, how can we make sure that these skills and all of this education is accessible to a wider scope of people? Beth, I want you to start.
So I'll start, but I'm sure others will chime in. I think we have to really begin to think about, can an individual imagine themselves in this job, right? If you don't know somebody who is a back-end software developer, it is hard to figure out how you're going to imagine yourself in that job and start yourself down a path to get there. It is hard. So how do we start to do that? How do we start to expose people to those opportunities at multiple points in their life? And we can't just do this. We have to do it in the K through 12 system, but I think we have to think more creatively about how we do it elsewhere, because it won't change fast enough if we just wait for each class of people to come through. So one of the things we've tried to do in our work with many of our partner organizations across Colorado is, how do we give people an ability to imagine themselves in that job? If you are a FedEx truck driver, you actually use or a UPS truck driver. I know I'm in Atlanta. Sorry. You use technology every day, right? It's a very technology-enabled job. You are probably comfortable with technology or you couldn't do that job. So maybe you want to do something different. How do you begin to understand what those skills are and how do they relate? So one is imagining yourself there. Two is finding the connections to those opportunities. And three, actually more ways of, if that's the sort of individual end, getting employers, and this comes back to skills, right? Having a different frame for what they're looking for and recognizing the sometimes unintended bias in the way that the criteria and heuristics they're using by definition exclude folks. And so how do you think about different ways of working that through? But it's got to be intentional.
And if you have additions to that.
One thing that I would add to that, which we haven't talked about in this conversation, is I also think you need to rethink and redesign the way financing of education and training is done. Because today, if you are in the, if you want to attend a training program that is $10,000 or so, for a low-income individual, for people from underrepresented communities, that is a very, you don't have that, and you are excluded based on your FICO score if you want to go get a loan. So again, that is baked into the system today. On the public side of the way financing is done, very little of it is actually tied to outcomes. Very little of it is tied to, is this going to make you better off? Think about the idea that, you know, we have $1.4 trillion of student debt at around 25% default or delinquency right now in the country, right? None of that financing was ever designed with the idea of, is this going to get you better off? If it gets you better off, great, but that was not part of the design principle, right, if you look at the system today. So I think rethinking that, because that then also ties to access. Right. Who has access to those opportunities in the system?
Right. All right, do we have some audience questions? I think there's one right, or two right up here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Michelle Toulier from Georgia Tech, where I'm the director of the Career Center. My question's for any of you, but it was prompted by Mark's opening comment about the opportunities in technology being heavily involved with a product mindset, and also your later comment about the importance of cross-functional collaboration. Do you think that this opens more of a door for students with a liberal arts background to contribute more in more meaningful ways, in heavier ways in technology, the technology world?
Yeah, it's a great question. Absolutely, I do think it opens up the door for people with liberal arts background. One example I'd give is that the product manager is typically the core of this product mindset team, of this very small team trying to drive things, and there is no training that I know of that leads to a product manager degree, right? So you sort of pull people into that from all different walks of life and all different educational backgrounds. And one area as an example that's done really well is anthropologists, because they're quite good at studying a civilization, figuring out what its norms are, figuring out what people want. And that's very much what you're trying to do in a product mindset, is figure out subsegments of who might want your product, and then study them and figure out what they really want and what they really need, even if they are not articulating it. And so that's an example. I think there are a lot of liberal arts skills that are really valuable.
I think we have another one right here.
Hello again. My name is Gerry Martina. I'm the founder and CEO of Honor Code here in Atlanta, Georgia. We build coalitions between K-12 educators and Atlanta's business community to build more sustainable workforce pipelines, and we do that through providing curriculum and training to schools to bring computer science and social emotional learning into the classroom. A recent CNN article showcases how Salesforce is dedicating $12.2 million in human and financial capital in their community work in the Bay Area public schools. And my question for you all is, in your opinion, how can our business community do a better job of allocating resources over the long term now to ensure that they do not have talent gaps later on?
Yeah. Great question, and I think certainly our experience in Colorado is there's lots of companies that would like to do that, and I think part of it on us working in this space is to help them translate desire into practical programs that have impact. So what are the kind of experiences? Are there opportunities? And there's a variety of ways to do it. And so I think one of the questions becomes, What is the way that a company can translate that? It could be their individuals volunteering on the Opportunity at Work platform. It could be hosting people in Colorado. You can have apprentices in your company, and that's not just because you want to do something good, it's because it is a source of future talent, and with a 2.3% unemployment rate, getting that talent early is in your business interest. You can think about how they do coaching and mentoring. So I think there's a real opportunity to turn a sort of, let me call it, broad-based desire into tangible actions, and help them understand the impact of those actions both on individuals and on their own company's results.
I will say, if I take it a step back, though, I think thinking about the future of work, and very much as the present, frankly, in terms of what's happening, we have to rethink the incentives, which are all designed today around return on invested capital, not around return on human capital. And that makes it very difficult for businesses with that incentive today to go as far as they need to go. I agree with that. There are things that they can do. But today, if you automated something or bought a piece of machinery, you could put that on your balance sheet for the next 5 years. Right. If you spent that money to train someone, it would be a P&L expense and you have to report it the next quarter. So thinking about what does that mean? When you look at the balance sheet of a company, every CEO, or a lot of them say it, our biggest asset is our people. It's not reflected in that stock. And what does that mean for us? What decisions does that drive? What incentives does that drive? What behavior does that drive in the system? So if we're really talking about the future of work, I think we have to think systemically about what it means, right, to deliver returns on human capital for everyone, right, in the economy today, not just the top half.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.